Hi everyone, this tutorial is to help you out with the Coding from Scratch JavaScript final project. Now, please note that this tutorial is not going to be the final project, rather it is going to be a project similar to what you will see in the final project. In doing this exercise and performing this task here, you'll see an example of how to accomplish something similar to the JavaScript final project. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a small application, an HTML page with some JavaScript, where the user will be able to input some text and then click a button, and then we will display in the HTML back to the user the total vowels that are in the text he put, or he or she inserted into the text area, as well as the percentage of each vowel. So like if there's 10 vowels and there's 2 A's, then there will be 20% A's out of those vowels. This is similar to the Coding from Scratch project in that it asks you to find the total number of sentences, the average words per sentence, so it's a lot of the same stuff. So first off, before you tackle any problem in programming or any task like this, what you need to do is take a step back and think about, alright, what is the logic behind this? Because whether you realize it or not, as humans, we do perform logic when we answer a question, such as, how many words are in this sentence? 3 people can be asked the same question, they would all come up with the same answer. And that's because there's some logic behind it. And the logic is, as you look at it, it may be implicit and you don't think about it, but you count everywhere you see a word and a space. So the space kind of helps tell us where there's a new word coming. So that's the logic behind it. In this example, we want to find every vowel. So the logic behind that, I mean, I could look at it and just say, oh, that's a vowel, that's a vowel, that's a vowel, but what am I really doing? What is my mind really doing? It's looking at each letter and it's saying, is that a vowel? Is that an A, E, I, O, U, or Y? If it's not, then I don't count it. If it is, then it is a vowel. I know that and I can count that. Now I want to take that same logic that I've stepped back and taken a look at, and I want to tell the computer to perform that same logic. And that's what we're going to do here. And the goal, the hope, is to get you in the mindset of thinking about how to step back and look at, how do I as a human make this decision? What is the logic behind it? And then apply it to the problem and be able to tell the computer to perform the same logic. So to get started, we need our HTML page. If you have a text editor that has a shortcut, that's great. You can do that like I did. Just make sure you get your you type in the skeleton of your HTML. And then in the body, we can go ahead and add the elements that we need. So for this assignment, we need a text area. Now I'm going to give that an ID. I'm going to call that input. The ID is there so that my JavaScript will be able to grab this element and then perform some operations on it and get the text out of it. And that ID is going to be unique, so that when I grab the element with the ID of input, it grabs this text area. We'll go ahead and give this 50 columns, and we'll say 20 rows. So right there, we'll close that, and then we'll add the closing tag. So it's text area. The next thing we need is the button that the user will push in order to actually perform the operation when they're ready to analyze the text. So we'll go ahead and give this an ID of calculate. And I'll give it some text saying analyze text. So like I said, when the user pushes this button, we want it to grab the input in the text area, and then we want it to tell us how many vowels there are total and what the percent of each vowel is. So let's go ahead and create a paragraph here where we will display some of this data, and we'll call it total vowels. We'll add a span here. The span is going to have an ID equal to total vowels, and this is where we are going to basically push the answer into. We'll replace this blank span with the answer. So go ahead and close the span, then go ahead and close the paragraph, and then we'll move on to the next piece, which is going to be the percent of A's. So I'll copy and paste that, and we will call this percent A's. And I'll give this an ID of percent A. Copy this because we need this for each one now. So we got EIOUY. Come here and change that up. EIOU and Y. Come back here. EIOUY. There we go. Now if I take a look at this in my browser, there we go. I've got the layout of what I want there. I can type text in here. I can click this button. Nothing happens yet because we have not added the JavaScript to tell it what to do, but that'll be our next step now that we've got that. So we're going to go here into our JavaScript now, and we're going to start defining what we want to happen when we click the button. Now, if you just start writing your JavaScript in here and you try to grab the elements by their ID, it's not going to work because the JavaScript will load before the HTML in some cases, and that will cause it to try to grab an ID of something that doesn't exist yet, so you'll get back null or undefined. In order to mitigate that, we can go ahead and use window.onload and then set that equal to a function. And then we can place all of our code right here inside this function. Then it will wait until the window is fully loaded, the document's fully there, and it will perform this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to grab the input element, this text area with the ID of input. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called input, and I'm going to set it equal to document.getElement by ID, and the ID is input, which is the ID of that text area. Make sure I spell that right. Get element by ID looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a reference. I'll call it calculate to the button, which I believe I gave an ID of calculate. Let's double check to make sure. Calculate, yeah. Good. Alright, so now I've got both of those, and that's what I need in order to grab the text the user puts in and to add an event listener to the button so that when it gets clicked it will perform some actions. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and add a few variables that will help us keep track of the data that we're interested in. First off, we need the total vowels, right? One of the biggest purposes of this is to calculate the amount of vowels that are in it, so we need a variable to store that data, so we'll set that equal to 0. Now we also need to know the percentage of each vowel compared to the total vowels. So in order to do that, we're not just going to create the percentages right away, we're going to keep track of how many of each vowel there are. So I'm going to say total A's equals 0, and then once we get this all calculated, we can just divide the total A's by total vowels to get the percentage of A's. We'll do the same thing with E, I, O, U, and Y. So it's E, I, O, U, and Y. Good. So now let's go ahead and take our calculate button and let's add an event listener to it. So the function for that is add event listener. The event we are going to listen to is click. So when a user clicks on it, we want to perform something, and that will be this function. Anything inside this function right here, this callback function, will happen. So let's go ahead and grab the input from the user. We can do that by creating a new variable. We'll call it text to analyze. We'll set it equal to input, which is this right here, the reference to our text area, dot value, and the value is the text that comes in from there. So then what we can do is let's make sure it's working so far, and let's do a console.log, and we'll log out the text to analyze to make sure we're able to grab it. So I'll come back here into my browser. I'll refresh this. I'll open my DevTools, which you can open this by clicking F12 or right-clicking, hit Inspect, and then go to the console. I'll type something in here. Hello world. Analyze text. It's not getting logged, so I missed something here. So let's go back and check. ID calculate. Text to analyze, input value. By ID. Oh, you know what I missed? I didn't hook my JavaScript up to my index.html. So we need to basically include the JavaScript file with our index.html. So let's go ahead and create a script tag here. We'll go source equals app.js. Then we'll close that up, and then close the script tag. Save that. Come back here. I'm gonna do a refresh here. Say, you know, it wasn't found. So let me actually go back real quick here. JS project app.js. Oh, you know what? There we go. Let's add those back. Refresh this. Looks good. Hello world. Analyze. There it is. It prints it out. So now this is a very good step. We know that we're able to put input into this box and then hit this button and grab that data, that text. So now we can start processing it and doing something with it. So let's think about, what do we want to do with this? I'm going to delete this console.log. We don't need that anymore. What we want to do here is loop. We want to check on each character to see if it is a val. Now in JavaScript, the nice thing about strings is that strings are an array of characters. It's a string of characters, hence the name string. So we can actually loop over it just like we could loop over any array. So we want to loop over each character and check to see if it's a val. If it is a val, what we want to do is increment our total vowels count here, and then we want to increment whichever val it is. So let's go ahead, first off, let's create a function called isVal that will return true if the letter is a vowel. So here's the function, we'll call it isVal, like I said, and this will take a letter, right? We're going to pass a letter into it to check if that letter is a vowel. So let's go ahead, first thing I want to do is set the letter equal to the uppercase version of the letter to uppercase. That way we don't have to check against lowercase and uppercase, we can just check against uppercase. So now here, there's a few things I could do. I could check for each vowel and return true if it is one of those vowels. I could check to see if it's A or I or U or O, etc., and then return true. Or I could simply return letter equals the vowel and do the next one. And before I get to there, the reason I can, instead of saying if letter equals A, return true, I can shorthand it to just return letter equals A, because this is a Boolean expression. Letter either equals A or it doesn't. That is either true or false. So this expression right here actually evaluates to true or false. So if I say return this, if the letter equals A, this will return true. And that's exactly what I want. But I also want to check if the letter equals that, or if the letter equals AE, or if the letter is equal to I, or if the letter is equal to O, or U, or if the letter is equal to Y. Make sure you use a double or triple equals there. We want to make sure that we don't put a single equal sign, because that is the assignment operator. We would then assign the value to letter, which is not what we want to do. So now we have this function that we can reuse over and over again. So it's perfect for this situation. The next thing we want to do is write a function that checks if the letter is specifically an A or specifically an E. That way, if it is a vowel, we can then pass it into this next function and increment the proper variable to keep track of it. So we'll go ahead and call that function increment vowel count, and that will take a letter, which we will also make it capitalized first thing so that we don't have to check against lowercase and uppercase. And in this situation, I will go ahead and do if letter equals a, then we want to total A's plus plus. We want to increment that. Then I'll add else if letter is equal to A to E, then total E's plus plus. I'm going to copy that. That's A, E, I, O, U, Y. So we'll change this. A, E, I, O, U, and Y. I'm getting really good at my vowels now. A lot of practice saying them in this. A, E, I, O, U, and Y. There we go. Alright, now we can go ahead, come back into our event listener here, and start using that. So what we want to do is we want to loop over each character in the string. So let's go ahead and say for var I equals 0, because we want to start at the beginning of the string, while I is less than our text to analyze length, then we will increment I and perform another iteration. So what this is saying here, basically we're going to loop over each character in the string. So let's say I equals 0 and the string has a length of 3. So is 0 less than 3? Yes, it will perform anything in here that we say. It will increment. I is now 1. Is 1 less than 3? Yes, it will perform it again. Now it's 2. Is 2 less than 3? Yes, it performs it again. That's the third time. Now it increments to 3. Is 3 less than 3? No. So it terminates the loop at that point. So what do we want to do for each character? Well, we want to check if each character is a vowel. Now that sentence itself there almost tells you exactly what you need. If a character is a vowel, we want to increment total vowels. So I can almost spell that out in English here in my code. If is vowel. Now, what letter do we want to pass in? Well, we want to pass in text to analyze, and we want to pass in the letter at the current index of I. So we do text to analyze, square brackets, I. When this is 0, it will grab the first index, because we go by 0. It will grab the first element from that string. Let's say the word is hello. It would be H. And then when it's 1, it will grab the E. When it's 2, it will grab the L, and so forth. So this will basically perform this action for each character in the string. So if it is a vowel, the first thing we want to do is increment our total vowels. That's easy enough. Then we want to check and see which vowel it is and increment that. Well, we just wrote a function for that. So we can say increment vowel count, pass in not the letter, sorry, pass in text to analyze I. That is the specific letter we want to pass into it. Now notice something I want to point out about functions real quick is these functions are defined here, but they're not yet used until I call them up here. It's like writing instructions. Let's say you're writing instructions to clean a house. Get out the broom, sweep the floor, get out the mop, mop the floor. As you're writing these instructions, the house isn't magically being cleaned, right? You're just creating the instructions for it. Once the instructions are done, the house still isn't clean. You have instructions. You need to follow the instructions or invoke the instructions. The same thing with a function here. This is just the definition. These are just the instructions of what to do. It doesn't actually perform anything. The computer doesn't actually do anything until we call the functions up here. Then it performs that functionality, those instructions, for what we pass into it. So that's very important to notice when you're talking about functions and learning them and trying to accomplish a programming task. That you can define functions, but they don't do anything until you actually call them or invoke them. Alright, so there's our 4. Once that's done, we now should have a count of the vowels in there. So let's go ahead and do document.get element by ID, and we want to grab the total vowels here because we want to display how many vowels there are. So get element by ID, total vowels, and then we're going to set the inner HTML equal to our variable total vowels. The inner HTML is basically the text that it will display to the user. So let's save this, come back here and refresh this and say hello world, hit analyze text, and we can see we have 3 vowels, E, O, and O. So that is working, and that's awesome. Next thing we want to do is update the percentage of each individual vowel. So let's say document.get element by ID, and we call this one %A. So we'll grab that, put that in there, set the inner HTML equal to the total A's, which is this up here, which we've been keeping track of by incrementing it in this function being called right here. And it's going to be total A's divided by total vowels, which is just how you find a percentage of something. And then let's go ahead and multiply it by 100 so that we get like a nice even number like 63 instead of 0.63. Then we can copy this, A, E, I, O, U, Y, here, E, I, O, U, Y, and one more time over here, E, I, O, U, and Y. Save that, come back here, we'll refresh it, let's do a hello world again, analyze the text. Now we've got 3 here, we've got our percentages, so that's good. I have an error here, total use is not defined, so let's look back here in my JavaScript, and I can see here A, E, I, O. I forgot to change that one to U. So let's go back here, refresh it, hello world, no error. I got my total vowels, I've got this. So it would appear that it's working, which is great, except for if I push this again, notice how total vowels right here is still incrementing. That's because it's adding on to that variable. Well, I don't want it to do that. I want to be able to, because if I put something else there, I want it to say 3. Unfortunately, it says 27. So what I want to do is I want to reset these variables each time the button gets clicked so that I can put in a different text and analyze that text by itself. So I can just copy that, we'll paste them in here to set them back equal to 0, and then I'll remove the var here because they're already declared. We don't want to redeclare them. We want to set the already declared variables back to 0. And we can do that by doing this here. So I'll save that, come back over here, do a hard refresh. Hello world. There we go. There's 1 E and 2 O's, so I've got 66 and 33%. Now if I change this up to I, it stays 3, I got 100, add another I. It doesn't go up to 7, it goes up to 4, which is exactly what we wanted to do by setting it back to 0. So again, the purpose of this is a task similar to the coding from scratch final JavaScript project, where it's having you do something very similar to this. At this point, you should be able to be thinking in the right way of how to accomplish that. Take a step back, look at the logic. How do you find when there's multiple words? How do you find new sentences and keep track of that? You'll have to set variables to keep track of the data and then perform a little bit of math on it. You'll have to do some Googling. There are a few more things that you'll have to figure out, but this type of thinking, this is the way you can go about solving that task. So just one more time, always take a step back and look at it and define the logic that you perform as a human in solving something. Like if you have a bag and you pour them out and you want to know how many of each are red and how many are blue, well, you can look at them and you count them and you got that, but what you're really doing is each time you grab a marble, you're saying, is this red or blue? If it's red, then I count 1 extra for red. If it's blue, I count 1 extra for blue. That is the logic you are performing in order to accomplish that. And then you can tell a computer to do the same thing. So hopefully this helped, and good luck on your coding from scratch JavaScript project.